Grade 11, so welcome to the third lesson of Exponents and SURDS. It's a great pleasure being with you again. Today I want us to discuss about negative exponents and the meaning of a to the power of 0 there. Okay, now for those who have been with me since day one of Exponents and SURDS would actually remember that on lesson 1 we talked about the meaning of a to the power of n. Now today I want us to discuss the meaning of a to the power of negative n. What does it mean to have an expression like this? Alright, now when having an expression like this, it means that a will divide into 1 how many times? N times. Alright, so that will be written as 1 over a times 1 over a times 1 over a, going on to the last term, which is 1 over a. And a divides into 1 how many times? N times, as indicated by the index there. Now this whole thing can actually be further simplified as 1 over a to the power of n, because 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 will actually give you 1 there, and then a times a times a, going on to the last term, which is a, will give you a to the power of n. N being the number of times this gets repeated by. Alright, for example, if I give you 2 to the power of negative 3, what is the meaning of that? It means that 2 will divide into 1 how many times? 3 times. Alright, so that will be 1 over 2 times 1 over 2 times 1 over 2. Alright, so this gets repeated 3 times here, as shown by the index. Now that we have this expression right here, we can further simplify it to be 1 over 2 to the power of 3 there, because 1 times 1 times 1 will give you 1, then 2 times 2 times 2 will give you 2 to the power of 3 there. Alright, because according to the laws of exponents, when you multiply the poles of the same base, what do? You add the exponents. Therefore 1 plus 1 plus 1 will give you 3 there. Alright, let's take a closer look at the second example here. If you have 3 to the power of negative 4, what is the meaning of that? It means that 3 will actually divide into 1 how many times? 4 times. So that will be 1 over 3 times 1 over 3 times 1 over 3 times 1 over 3. Alright, so 3 will go into 1 how many times? 1, 2, 3, 4. So it will go 4 times, as shown by the index here. And this whole thing can further simplify to 1 over 3 to the power of 4. 1 over 3 to the power of 4. And 1 over 3 to the power of 4 can be written as 1 over 81 there. Okay, so that will be your final answer there. Now that we've actually seen or understood the meaning of a to the power of negative n, I think it's about time now we should look at how we can convert negative exponents to positive exponents. Alright, now in order for us to be able to convert negative exponents to positive exponents, there are little rules to help us with that here. So as you can see here, we have rule number 1, rule number 2, and then rule number 3. Now it's not official that this is rule number 1. I just named it rule number 1 for the sake of referencing. Okay, so when I say rule number 1, I'm actually referring to this rule here. If I say rule number 2, I am referring to this rule over here. If I say rule number 3, I am referring to this rule. Now let's uncover rule number 1 and see how rule number 1 works. Well, if you have a negative exponent there, that exponent can be written as 1 over a to the power of n. But if you can check carefully, we have already described how this is actually derived. If you can check at our first example there, let me just scroll back so that you can see. You can see here we have a to the power of negative n. We said that a to the power of negative n means that how many times will a divide into 1? We said that it will divide n times, and then we have shown that by writing this expression here, and we said that this expression can further simplify to 1 over a to the power of n. So if a to the power of negative n is equal to this expression, and this expression is equal to 1 over a to the power of n, we can then conclude that a to the power of negative n is equal to 1 over a to the power of n. So that's where rule number 1 comes from. Alright, so this is it over here. So we have a to the power of negative n being equal to 1 over a to the power of n there. Now let me show you how this rule works. If you have maybe a negative exponent, this negative sign will become a division line. Alright, so it'll become a division line, and then a will sit on the denominator, and then you will raise it to a positive exponent of n, as you can see here, and then the numerator will become 1. Alright, so that's how the first rule works. Now let's take a closer look at examples to see how we can apply this rule here. If you have 2 to the power of negative 3, how can you write it as a positive exponent? Well, this negative sign will become a division line. Then 2 will sit on the denominator, and then you will raise it to a positive exponent of 3. Alright, and then the numerator will become 1. Let's write that and see how it will look like. It will be 1 over 2 to the power of 3 there. You see, so this negative sign becomes a division line. 2 sits on the denominator, and then 3 is actually going to be positive in this case, and then the numerator will be 1 there. Alright, now in a case whereby you have a negative exponent being multiplied by another term, which is 3, how can you convert a negative exponent to become a positive exponent in that case? Well, it is the same principle. Check, this will be 3, alright, and then this negative sign becomes a division line. So it'll be a division line, and then your x will sit on the denominator. Your x will come and sit on the denominator, and then it will be raised to the power of 2. Alright, so there will be x to the power of 2. Alright, and then the numerator there, it will be 1 there. Okay, it will be 1. And now when you multiply 3 with 1 over x squared, that will give you a final answer of 3 over x to the power of 2, because 3 multiplied by 1 will give you 3. Alright, so this is like your final answer D. Alright, now let's take a closer look at the rule number 3, or rather rule number 2. How does rule number 2 works? Well, it's very simple. When you have 1 over a negative exponent, you know what you have to do? You just have to take this a. So you'll take a and bring him up to the numerator. So when a goes up to the numerator, he will change the exponent from negative to positive there, and then 1 will come down to the denominator. So in this situation, you will have a to the exponent of n divided by 1, and a to the power of n divided by 1 will give you a to the power of n. Alright, for example, if you have 1 over x to the power of negative 4, that can be written as x to the power of 4 over 1 there. So what you do, you switch the numerator and the denominator. X goes up, 1 goes down. Alright, so when x goes up, he automatically changes the exponent from negative to positive there. So you'll have this expression right here, and then this can further simplify to x to the power of 4, because anything divided by 1 is that number. Alright, now what if you have y over x to the power of negative 2 there? Now in this case, the numerator is not 1, and now that the numerator is not 1, we cannot switch the numerator and the denominator. So what we have to do is we have to make sure that the numerator is 1. So we can rewrite this in a form of y multiplied by 1 over x to the power of negative 2. Alright, and then when you have actually written it in this form, it will be easier to simplify it, because thus it will actually become y, and then you know that when you switch the numerator in the denominator, when taking x, bringing him up to the numerator, he will become a positive exponent, and then when you take 1 and bring him down to the denominator, he will just actually, leave us with x to the power of 2 there. So you will just remain with x to the power of 2 there. So your final answer will be y times x to the power of 2. Okay, so now let's have a look at rule number 3. Rule number 3 works the same way as rule number 1. What you have to do, if you have a fraction that's raised to a negative exponent, you can just simply interchange the numerator and the denominator there. Alright, so in this case, if you have a over b, when you convert it so that it becomes a positive exponent, b will come and sit on the numerator there, and then a will sit on the denominator there, as you can see here on the right hand side. So it will be b over a raised to a positive exponent. Alright, so in this case it will be like, let's say maybe for example you have 2 over 3 raised to a negative exponent of 4. So if you want to write that as a positive exponent, that will be 3 over 2. Alright, and then you raise it to a positive exponent of 4 there. So that's how simple it is to convert a negative exponent to a positive exponent there. Now let's have a second example to see how we can do this. If you have 4 over 3 raised to a negative exponent, you can write that as 3 over 4, and then you raised it to a positive exponent of 2. Alright, so that's how rule number 3 works. Let's have a closer look at the final example. If you have 3x to the power of negative 1 multiplied by 1 over 4x multiplied by 1 over multiplied by y over, if you have 3x to the power of negative 1 multiplied by y all over 4x to the power 4x multiplied by y to the power of negative 1, you can actually write that as 3 will actually sit on the numerator. Now that x is negative, if you can check the x is negative, so he will come down and sit on the denominator, and then y is negative also, so he will come up and sit on the numerator. So in this case, this y will go up to the numerator there, so we will have y times y all over 4 over x times x, because this x came down to the denominator then, and y times y will give us y squared, x times x will give us x squared. So the final answer there will be 3y squared over 4x squared there. So that's how you can actually change negative exponents to positive exponents. Now let's discuss the last section of this lesson, which is exponents raised to the power of, or rather a raised to the power of 0 there. What does it mean to have an expression like this? Well, anything that's raised to a power of 0 is actually 1 there. So if you have 2 to the power of 0, it will give you 1. If you have 5 to the power of 0, it will give you 1. Okay, so if you have let's say 16 raised to the power of 0, that will be 1. 2 to the power of 0, it's 1. 100 raised to the power of 0, there it will give you 1. Now in the next lesson, we are going to explore further examples of negative exponents. So make sure to stay tuned. See you on the next one.